more on the ins and outs of negotiations, I'm joined by Gidi, former peace negotiator under Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and author of Insight, Peacemaking in the Oslo Process, 30 Years and Counting. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Is there a chance of returning the hostages at this stage, or are we back to square one?
Well, we're in the middle of a diplomatic process, diplomatic and political process, in which there's obviously these eruptions of war situations between Israel and Hamas. And I think the context here is very important. Since 2014, Israel has basically sought the Prime Minister Netanyahu to bifurcate the Palestinian Authority between the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, which basically led to everything we have seen over the last 10 years, with the bolstering of Hamas, the allowing it to receive money, eventually to build its capabilities, also to open the borders and connect with the world. Meanwhile, Hamas built itself as the leading movement within the Palestinian national movement, meaning Hamas eventually wants to lead the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, and become the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. In order to do that, they need to see the demolition of the Oslo Accords, the dismantling of the Palestinian Authority, and eventually they can take over the entire national movement. This has been the basic approach on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side since before the war, and it continues during the war. We see that Prime Minister Netanyahu does not allow the connection between Gaza and the West Bank, will not allow the Palestinian Authority to participate in the negotiation with Hamas, etc., etc. All of these kind of boil down to what we call the second phase of the deal that was signed in January 18, because in the second phase, the long-term future of Gaza would have been determined, not formally in an agreement, but effectively determined on the ground, which is why it was clear that the government of Israel would not move on to the second phase of the deal, and they would not implement it. So I kind of sadly smile when I hear our Minister of Defense speak about genuine negotiations, because Israel was clear from day one that it will not go on with the second phase of the deal that it signed on January 18 with the Trump administration. So now when we expand the view again to what's going on right now, we're actually looking at a situation where if Hamas ends up giving the hostages, all the hostages, as is demanded by the Americans and the Israelis, it has no guarantee whatsoever about the day after that, meaning they give up the hostages and then what? Israel comes out and kills all of them? There is Israel did not offer a political vision for Gaza, even with the removal of Hamas, that gives some sort of a future. And therefore, the incentive of Hamas to do a deal on the hostages right now is very small and limited. Yes, they're being beat very, very hard. But in politics and national security, it's all about the alternatives. And all the viewers should ask themselves, what is the alternative for Hamas? Even if the leadership of Hamas leaves Gaza, still, the grassroots leadership of Hamas, who is the only one there to manage the daily needs of the population, welfare, healthcare, etc. So we're looking at this situation where Hamas is really obviously locked between a rock and a hard place. But Israel or the Americans are not offering Hamas some sort of a way out that is favorable than going to war. That's why I'm very skeptical that the deal on the hostages can happen in the current conditions.
And as you mentioned,
and I hope I'll be proven wrong.
And as you mentioned, Israel and Hamas did agree to a specific format to the deal back on January 18th. But that seems to be something that Israel has started to veer from, given the airstrikes overnight, as negotiations for the phase 2 of the deal were meant to begin. So is Israel to blame in part for breaking this deal?
Look, Hamas is a very brutal enemy, and Hamas, I think there is one consensus in the Middle East, left and right, people pro-peace and anti-peace, that Hamas cannot continue to control Gaza if there is any future for peaceful coexistence. That is agreed among the Israeli side, the American side, all European partners, all Arab partners, because Gaza cannot be rebuilt if Hamas is there, because if Hamas is there, there'll be future conflict. There is no prospect for peace if Hamas is there. And there are many more reasons why this broad coalition that Hamas has to be removed. But the process, the architecture of removing Hamas requires careful and surgical diplomatic collaboration between Israel, Egypt, the US, other countries, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. that architecture, that path to the removal of Hamas and the replacing of Hamas with a some other self-governing Palestinian entity is simply not there. It's astonishing. 16 months into the war, and the government of Israel has not put forward a plan for the day after in Gaza that combines the economic side with the political side, that what we call the day after, which is the immediate aftermath of the ceasefire, and some sort of a political horizon. None of that exists. So we are in a situation where we're pushing Hamas to the corner with military means. And by the way, it's totally legitimate to use military means in a diplomatic political process. But we're not offering them an alternative that is better than fighting to death, which is sadly more likely to happen than the deal of bringing back the hostages. The viewers should ask themselves, in the government of Israel, in its internal discussions, have they decided whether the borders of Gaza will change? Have they decided whether they're going to annex parts of Gaza? Whether the Palestinians in Gaza are staying or leaving? Who will control the Palestinians of Gaza, even those that are staying? Will it be a Palestinian self-governing body or someone else? Will it be the Palestinian Authority? The Americans have already said, we will take over Gaza, but only if it is handed to us clean and dandy by Israel. What does it mean? Taking over Gaza, cleaning it up, establishing a civil administration? Where are the answers to these questions 16 months after the beginning of the war? These are the questions that every viewer should ask themselves when they're observing what's going on right now.
Right, the future still feels very uncertain all this time since the war began. Gidi Greenstein, thank you for your insight.
Thank you very much.